Audience ready?
Yeah.
Nowadays, America is dominated by two main political parties, the Democratic and Republican Party. However, it was not always Democrats versus Republicans. There was a constant ebb and flow of different political parties throughout America's history, and I thought I would shed some light on some of the lesser-known ones. Hi, my name is Eli Williamson, and this is my informative speech on political parties in America. We start when America is barely out of the cradle, so to speak. There's a debate between then Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson and the Secretary of Treasury Alexander Hamilton. Their debate is over the future of America. Jefferson believes that the future of America is in its rural farming communities, while Hamilton believes the strength of America is in its cities and industry. This leads to divide throughout the country. Those who support Hamilton become the Federalist Party, while those who support Jefferson become the Democratic Republicans. This is the first example of the American two-party system, a system that is alive and well today. This rift went on for a while, however, with the death of Alexander Hamilton and the disastrous presidency of Federalist John Adams, the Federalist Party began quickly losing steam. For the War of 1812, the Federalist Party was nothing but a regional party in New England. However, what was left of them was staunchly anti-war, and with the War of 1812 raging, the Federalist Party threatened to secede from the Union. America would end up winning the War of 1812, making the Federalists look like a bunch of traitors, leading to most Federalist support being halted after the war. The party was dissolved quickly thereafter. This ushers in the era of good feelings, where the Democratic Republicans were nearly uncontested on a national scale, with no main party to compete against them. However, this all changed with the ideals of one man, a War of 1812 vet who would single-handedly reshape American politics. His name was Andrew Jackson. Jackson was born in poverty. This is important because many of his supporters saw him as a rags-to-riches story as he went on to win the most famous battle of the War of 1812. This was also important as with so much time left unopposed, people saw the Democratic Republicans as corrupt, and they saw Jackson as an everyman. This led to Jackson gaining enough support to create his own political party, the Democratic Party. The formation of the Democrats shook the Democratic Republicans to their core. Many agreed with Jackson and so joined with the Democrats, while many saw Jackson as a despot guided by his own self-interest, and so created a party to oppose him. This became known as the Whig Party, one of the strangest in American history. The Whigs were a big tent party. This meant that they had different ideas on how the country should be run, however, agreed on one key issue. That issue was hating Andrew Jackson. However, this led to a disconnect with voters with the Whigs, as regional Whigs believed different things, and so many voters didn't know what they were voting for when they voted Whig. They were pro-expansionist and anti-expansionist Whigs, pro-isolationist and anti-isolationist Whigs. However, the debate that really tore the Whigs apart was that over slavery. In the 1840s, the slavery debate had become too hot for any party to ignore. Before, parties had tried to appeal to both North and South by ignoring the issue altogether, however, that was no longer possible. The Democrats, with most of their support coming from the South, quickly took on the mantle as the pro-slavery party. As for the Whigs, there were Northern anti-slave and Southern pro-slave Whigs. This led to the Whig Party inevitably splitting in two, with the Southern Whigs joining with the Democrats, and the Northern Whigs forming with a radical abolitionist party, the Free Soil Party. Together, the Free Soilers and the Whigs combined to create the first mainstream, moderate anti-slave party, the Republican Party. Now, the slavery debate took on party lines, with the Northern anti-slave Republicans and the Southern pro-slave Democrats. With the election of the first Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, the fuse that had been shortening since the start of the nation was lit and ignited in a brutal civil war. A war between North and South, abolition and slavery, Republican and Democrat. After 4 years of brutal fighting, the North and the Republican Party stood victorious. The Republican Party began enforcing their will onto the defeated South. This ushered in another era of good feelings, and for the next 60 years, the Republicans were nearly uncontested. In fact, only one non-Republican held office in this 60-year span. However, just like the era of good feelings, people began seeing the Republican Party as increasingly corrupt, turning a blind eye to the monopolies that were now bribing American politicians. However, this ideal changed with an assassination of all things. With the assassination of William McKinley, his vice president, by all accounts uncorruptible Teddy Roosevelt, took office. Roosevelt saw the corruption that was gripping his party and his nation and sought to root it out. He began breaking up many of the monopolies that had been bribing American politicians for generations, and went down as one of the most successful American presidents. After his 2 terms were up, he left the keys to the nation to his friend and fellow Republican Howard Taft. Taft, however, was not an effective president. He found it increasingly harder to fill Roosevelt's big shoes. In fact, after Taft's first term, Roosevelt called Taft out for being a poor president. Taft was offended by the words of his former friend, and so refused to step down as the Republican candidate as the incumbent. Roosevelt, who thought that he ought to seek a third term, created his own party, the Progressive or Bull Moose Party. The Democrats put forth their candidate, Woodrow Wilson. On paper, Roosevelt was by far the most popular. However, many people did not like how he went around the party system to create his own party, and so cast a vote for Taft anyway. This led to the Republican vote being split, allowing for the smaller Democratic Party to win, allowing Woodrow Wilson to take office. Wilson was the first Democrat in a long time, and so began changing many long-standing Republican ideals, most importantly isolationism. He believed that America ought to have a bigger presence on the world stage, and he changed this ideal forever by entering World War I. After the war, 3 unremarkable Republican presidents took office. However, when America was gripped by the heart by the Great Depression, people wanted something different. They wanted a New Deal, and that was promised to them by Democrat Franklin Delano Roosevelt. FDR is one of the most important presidents in American history. He entered World War II, fought the Great Depression, and was all around a great president. However, what he did that was even more important is that he reshaped the Democratic Party nearly single-handedly. He erased many of the blemishes the Democrats still had on their record and brought them to a near equal playing field with the Republicans, which is the modern era of politics, where the Democrats and Republicans are nearly equally matched on a national scale, which is how it still is today. So why is any of this important? The parties now are unrecognizable from how they were 150 years ago, light years away. However, I still think it's important to remember what they did. Of course, remember the good things, the reforms that they did to help the country grow, but what's even more important is to remember the bad things. Remember how they tore the country apart, how they divided people. Because those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. Thank you.